Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Madagascar's president sacks his government and young protesters take to the streets once again in frustration over patchy access to water and electricity. The government rejects the UN's estimate that at least 22 people have been killed over days of unrest. Also, as Rwandan sports fans bask in the afterglow of a job well done in the wake of the Road Cycling World Championships held in the country and on the continent for the first time, some critics of Kigali on other fronts cautioned against allowing the success to divert attention away from its involvement in regional conflicts. Also, the Irish play Translations is one of the country's most celebrated works, with themes of linguistic imperialism and colonial power. It's now premiering in Senegal with a local cast for the first time, at a moment when France's colonial legacy there is under increasing scrutiny. But first, there were more protests in Madagascar on Monday, even as President Andry Rajoelina tried to rein in popular outrage by firing the government. There have been days of fatal unrest over the country's crumbling infrastructure. On Monday, the UN estimated that at least 22 people had been killed in crackdowns on the youth-led marches that first erupted last Thursday. The UN's human rights chief has said that he was shocked at the extent of the force with which Madagascan security officers responded to crowds. But some of the deaths have also been attributed to looting and violence by gangs taking advantage of the unrest. A nighttime curfew has been imposed on the capital Antananarivo and other major cities, and that's been in place since Friday. But widespread frustration over authorities' failure to provide reliable essential amenities continues to simmer over.
Tear gas and stones thrown in Madagascar's capital. Hundreds of mostly young protesters faced off with security forces in Antananarivo on Saturday. Police blocked them from marching towards the city centre. Many held placards saying, "We are poor, angry and unhappy, and Madagascar is ours."
The president is just lying. He doesn't listen to us. All we are asking for is that he leaves. We want change.
Water and electricity are pillars of development. You constantly say Madagascar must develop, but you have no solution, even though you have been in power for years.
It comes days after a deadly anti-government demonstration erupted into looting. On Thursday, police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds who had come to condemn persistent water and power cuts in the impoverished nation, but descended into violence as stores were looted, cars set alight, and parts of the city barricaded.
We are fighting against the daily power cuts, and when we claim our rights, we are attacked. We have the right to electricity and water.
President Andry Rajoelina, who was in New York for the General Assembly, sacked his energy minister on Friday in a bid to calm protests, acknowledging that the energy minister was not doing his job, but firmly condemned the pillaging and violence. Some 75% of the country's estimated 30 million people lived below the poverty line in 2022, according to the World Bank.
Now, a special court in South Sudan's ruled that it can hear the treason case against suspended Vice President Riek Machar. Now, he and 7 co-accused also face murder and crimes against humanity charges. But Machar's team had argued that the trial at Juba's Freedom Court could not proceed. The defense says that Machar had immunity from prosecution, that proceedings were unconstitutional, and that the court lacked jurisdiction. All objections, though, were dismissed on Monday, and the case will continue on Wednesday. The charges are over deadly clashes in Nasir back in March between government forces and the White Army militia, which has allegedly links to Machar. Machar has been under house arrest ever since, and the standoff has sparked fears of renewed conflict in South Sudan. Now, Cameroon's gearing up for presidential elections next month. But as campaigning kicks into high gear, The world's oldest head of state, who is running for an 8th term after running the country since 1982, was nowhere to be seen over the weekend. Paul Biya was absent as opposition parties rallied their supporters in Douala. They want change, but Paul Biya remains the favourite.
Gathered in the rain, hundreds of UNDP supporters cheered on as their candidate took to the stage. For his first official campaign rally, former Tourism Minister Bello Buba Maigari called on Cameroonians to go vote massively on October 12th.
Turn out in force. Do not let others decide for you. Go and claim your voter cards.
Cameroon's presidential campaign officially kicked off this weekend, just 2 weeks before voting day. Several opposition candidates held rallies in Douala, including PCRN's Cabral Libri, who came in third in the last presidential polls in 2018. His supporters see the 45-year-old as the embodiment of change in a country that's been governed by the same president since 1982.
We want a new person as head of state. Since I was born, I've only known one president. This time we need someone new, a young person like Cabral. That's why I support him.
There was no public appearance by incumbent Paul Biya, who left the country last week for a private trip to Europe. The 92-year-old, who's seeking an 8th consecutive term at the head of the country, released his own campaign clip on Saturday, a 3-minute-long video that sparked a wide array of reactions on social media for its heavy reliance on AI-generated footage.
A massive fire in Namibia's flagship national park has been contained. The blaze scorched through more than a third of Etoda National Park after it first broke out on the 22nd. The government sent out 500 soldiers on Sunday to ramp up the response to the emergency. It's one of the continent's largest game reserves, and the fire is thought to have started at a charcoal production site nearby. It's still not clear how much wildlife may have been killed. Now, Rwandan sports fans are basking in the afterglow of a job well done in the wake of the Road Cycling World Championships, which were held in the Rwandan capital. It was the first time the event was ever held in Africa. Our correspondent Juliette Monti was there.
The Cycling World Championships in Kigali are over. I'm here at the Convention Center where the finish line stood for an event that electrified global cycling but also took Rwanda's reputation in the sport up a gear. And as you can see, everything is already being dismantled. Rwanda pulled it off, hosting the very first of these championships held in Africa. Athletes have said that they were very impressed by the flawless organization. The atmosphere was pretty lively despite a slow start. Even the weather played along. It's a huge source of pride for Rwandans. Many say they're thrilled to have seen the world's top riders in action.
This week was so exciting because we had to host this championship, and we're so proud of Rwanda to be one of the countries chosen to represent this championship.
It's very symbolic since it's the first African country, and seeing how the organizers prepared, they organized everything well. It was very good.
I had a very good week. It was when a Canadian won the women's championship.
Following his triumph on Sunday, world champion Tadej Pogacar was effusive about the welcome he received here in Kigali.
It was incredible, and we had a lot of support, and it was just an amazing whole day, an amazing whole week, and an amazing experience. And I was really happy to have so much support.
Now, beyond the event's relevance to sport, it was also a massive communication opportunity for Rwanda. An estimated 300 million viewers tuned in worldwide. It was a chance to showcase Kigali and the modernity of its infrastructure. But the race for development is still on for the country, even if it is often held up as an example of a so-called economic miracle. Despite huge progress over the last couple of decades, poverty remains a huge hurdle, particularly in rural areas.
While alongside the praise, some critics of Kigali on the political front have cautioned against allowing the success of the cycling event to divert attention away from the country's involvement in the destabilizing conflict in DR Congo. Rwanda is accused of supporting the M23 rebels that have fueled violence there this year.
There is a word for it, sport washing, which is the use of major sporting events to whitewash human rights violations or a country's human rights record. There are concerns not only about Rwanda's domestic human rights record, where space for opposition, civil society and the media is extremely limited, but it also raises questions about Rwanda's role in eastern DR Congo, just a few hundred kilometers from the championships, where we've documented serious abuses, possible war crimes committed by the M23 armed group with Rwanda's support.
Well, in Ireland, Brian Friel's Translations is one of the country's most celebrated plays. Themes of linguistic imperialism, colonial power, and identity run throughout. Well, now for the first time in West Africa, Translations is premiering in Dakar with a Senegalese cast. And all this at a moment when France's own colonial legacy is being increasingly rejected. Many say the parallels feel striking. Our correspondent Caitlin Kelly went to the premiere.
Set in a small Irish village in the 1830s, Brian Friel's Translation could feel worlds away from West Africa. But here in Dakar, the play has been reimagined in French for the first time in the region, at a moment when questions around colonial legacy are alive.
Votre pays!
The story follows British soldiers sent to replace Irish place names with English ones. Misunderstandings with local villagers escalate, especially when a young woman falls in love with one of the soldiers. Through these encounters, the play explores identity, language loss, and colonial power, issues that strike a nerve in Senegal too. Like language as a form of cultural domination, after French rule marginalized local languages like Wolof, now being reclaimed.
That's what we're seeing happening right now in Ziguinchor. French names are being changed to Senegalese names.
As countries across the region move away from their colonial past, translations could not be more timely.
It's a pleasure to perform this story, which speaks to us, talking about Ireland, but above all, showing the similarities between us and Ireland. That's what really touched us.
We feel that there's lots of resonance between the themes of the play, although set in Ireland, that are relevant for Senegal also. So very much that tension between the new and the old, the impact of colonialism on culture, on language, the importance of language, the importance of expression and communication, and the importance of one understanding each other. You know, I think just like Ireland, there's a very rich oral tradition in Senegal, and from speaking to people here tonight, I think they were able to relate to some of the key themes.
Brought to life by a 10-member Senegalese cast with support from a local theatre company and the Irish Embassy, the play was staged at universities over the summer. And after tonight's success, it aims to reach wider audiences by early next year.
One interesting translation indeed. Well, that's it, though, for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
This week on Paris des Arts, with her new novel, No Night Will Be Dark, author Fatou Diome plays a striking and poetic tribute to her grandfather.
Par le verbe et par la puissance de l'amour, je confisquerai mon Gabriel et sa Harit aux ombres, afin que leur sourire éclaire ma vie pour toujours.
Then it's off to Le Bon Marché to discover Babel, the new show by choreographer Mourad Merzouki.
J'aime le corps en mouvement parce que le corps en mouvement, il dit, il raconte, il crée de l'émotion.
Finally, Imani delights us with her 5th album, Women Deserve Rage. Valérie Fayolle presents Paris des Arts on France 24.